What's up YouTube, it's Jonah from Meta Athletics here. In this video today I wanted to make a guide for sled sprints, covering everything from why you should do sled sprints if you're wanting to get faster, how you can implement them into your training, and what you can do as a replacement if you don't have access to sleds. So if you're interested in getting faster, make sure you stick around for this video. So what are sled sprints? Essentially, sled sprints is just sprinting with a sled behind you that has some weight on it. The purpose of this is to add some resistance to the sprint rather than just doing your typical bodyweight sprints. So there are many reasons why you should be doing sled sprints in your training as opposed to only doing regular bodyweight sprints, because sled sprints actually have quite a few advantages that bodyweight sprints just don't have. So if you look at athletes who have really good acceleration speeds like Christian Coleman or John Ross in the 40, what they have in common is that they can apply a lot of force and power in a horizontal direction, and this is exactly what you train with sled sprints. So the reason sled sprints are so good at training that horizontal power compared to regular bodyweight sprints is because very early in a bodyweight sprint, you hit your peak horizontal power early in the run, and then after you hit it, it drops off very quickly. Whereas when you compare it to a sled sprint, you hit your horizontal power, but then since you have the weight on your back, you can ride out that power for a longer portion of the run, even till the finish, and so it gives you a longer time under tension. You can compare this to the gym if you're wanting to get stronger in the gym. On all your lifts, you wouldn't just do one rep for a certain amount of sets. You use a higher number of reps than just one, so you can get a sufficient time under tension and give your body a good enough stimulus to actually want to adapt. It's the exact same thing with the sled sprints. Being good at acceleration is really dependent on your ability to be comfortable with the feeling of falling, because essentially what you're doing in acceleration is with every step you're stopping yourself from falling over and propelling yourself to the next step in the sprint. So since you have the sled with weight holding you up, you can actually hit those deep acceleration positions, and it gets your body exposed to the positions you want to hit in acceleration. Whereas if you're just using the unresisted bodyweight sprints, it makes it hard to force yourself into those low positions, so it makes it really hard to actually adapt and get used to those positions. So this is really good for some athletes who maybe project too high and they want to figure out how to project lower. A, it'll get you stronger in that position, and B, it'll get you comfortable in that position, so eventually you'll actually be able to hit them properly. So another way that sled sprints improves your sprint technique is that it slows the run down. This is very beneficial for training purposes because making each step slower than what you're used to, it actually gives you time to consciously think in the moment of what's going on in your lower body. With regular bodyweight sprints, each step in the sprint and the actual run itself happens so fast that it's hard to be aware of what's going on during the run, and so a lot of the thinking is done either after the rep or before the rep. But with sled sprints, since each step is so much slower, you can actually be aware and conscious of what's going on in the moment. So for someone who's knee dominant in their sprints, who wants to focus on being more glute and hip dominant, but they typically have trouble feeling that, this is a really good opportunity for them to actually practice that feeling during a run. And then eventually you get so many reps with it that with your regular unresisted sprints, that feeling and that muscle memory transfers over. One question we get a lot regarding sled sprints is, how do you figure out what the optimal load is to put on the sled? Researchers have found that the optimal loading for a sled to improve that horizontal power that we discussed is that it lies between 69 to 96% of your body weight in load. The reason why this range is so big is also why it's hard to prescribe sled loading specifically based on percentage of body weight. It's because not all athletes are equal in their strength or power capabilities, so if you give the same body weight loading to multiple athletes, they might respond different to that loading just because of the difference in strength and power. You can think of a coach who wants to get his team of athletes stronger. He wouldn't tell his athletes, I want everyone to squat 150% of their body weight for reps, and that's what we're going to do, because 150% of body weight for one athlete might be a breeze because they're so strong, so they'll end up getting almost nothing out of it. Whereas for another athlete, they might not even be able to squat 150% of their body weight. So even though you have the same percentage of body weight load, you get two or multiple completely different results from that loading scheme. So start thinking of sled sprints in that same way, where it's not just based upon your body weight, rather it's a percentage based upon your actual capabilities of pulling a specific weight. That 69 to 96% body weight range can be a little bit unreliable because you have to account for the force of friction between your sled and whatever surface you're running on, since this can add significant amounts of resistance. So say you're 200 pounds and you wanted to load 70% body weight, it's not as simple as going and slapping on 140 pounds and expecting that to be 70% body weight, because you didn't account for the resistance that the friction on your sled and the ground adds. So this could add like for example, 50 extra pounds. So what you thought was 140 pounds of resistance might actually be like 190 or 200 pounds of resistance, just based on whatever surface you're running on. To find the optimal sled loading for you to improve your horizontal power and acceleration speed, you can do what's called a load velocity profile. I won't get too deep into it in this video because it's not practical for most athletes, but essentially it involves running anywhere from 15 to 30 yards or meters, and then having the technology to be able to measure each 5 or 10 meter segment within that run, so you can find out where in the run you hit your highest speed and what your highest speed at each segment is. What I found to be a great and convenient method for myself and for a lot of athletes to find a good sled loading is honestly just trial and error. There are a few things you need to keep in mind when using trial and error. You need to use a weight that allows you to get up to a maximum speed, and then you can hold that maximum speed for the remainder of the rep without slowing down at all. Say you're an athlete who wanted to improve the 20 to 30 meter segment of your acceleration. What you would do is you could find a weight that allows you to get up to the max speed at around 20 meters, and then you would hold that for the 10 meters at the end, so for the 20 to 30 meter segment, but you would make sure that the weight is light enough so you're not slowing down before you finish. But you would also make sure that the weight is heavy enough so that you're not still building speed by the time you finish the run. The nice thing with sleds is you can specifically focus fire on certain segments in the run you want to work on. So say the first 10 meters of your run is what's weak, then you can really load the sled heavy and then just focus fire on 10 meter sprints with that weight. Or if you wanted to improve the 10 to 20 meter segment of your sprint because that's what's lacking for you, then you can lighten up the load a little bit and then just do sprints out to 20 meters with the sled. And so as you get closer to the season, as you get closer to, if you're a football player, doing your 40-yard dash at a combine, then you would slowly lengthen out the sled sprint lengths, and then as a result you would also lighten the weight. I'll get into the actual planning and implementation of sled sprints now. We like to use them from the start of the training year all the way to the competitive season for athletes. It's just at the start the loads will be heavier and the distances will be shorter, but then as the season and the training year goes on, we'll lengthen out the distances, and as a result we'll lower the weight on the sled as well. Early in the training year, when the training intensities are a little bit lower, we typically have 2 acceleration sessions per week, one on Monday and one on Friday, and there's a couple setups we like to use. We'll do Monday as our unresisted day, and then we'll do Friday as our sled sprint day. Or what we'll do is we'll do both days, have a mix of unresisted and resisted sprints. So maybe you start the practice off with your resisted sprints and then contrast it with your unresisted at the end, or you alternate each rep, whereas the first one's resisted, second one's unresisted, and then just keep going back and forth on that. As the training season goes on and intensities start to get a little bit higher in training, we typically peel back to just 1 acceleration sprint session a week, and so there's a couple ways you can set this up as well. One method you can use is just alternating between resisted and unresisted sprints every week. So maybe week 1 in your training cycle has no sled sprints, and then week 2 is all sled sprints, then you just keep alternating this week after week. Or what we typically do is we'll mix them into one session. So we'll start off the session with a few resisted sprints and then finish off with unresisted. Or even at some points in the year, we'll alternate every single rep within that session. So rep 1 is resisted, rep 2 unresisted, and then just keep alternating those back and forth for the remainder of the session. Now, if you don't have a sled, the next best option is hill sprints. Find a hill that has a respectable incline and then just do sprints all the way up that, and you will still get very similar benefits to resisted sprints. The key is that when you're doing hill sprints that you start on the incline and you don't start on the flat and then sprint onto the incline. You want to start at the base of the incline and then just sprint up the entire way. So what are the key takeaways in this video here? Well, for one, doing resisted sprints in the form of sled or hill sprints improve your horizontal power and force much faster than just regular bodyweight sprints. And remember, your ability to accelerate fast is very reliant on your ability to produce horizontal force and power. Also, you shouldn't rely on a universal bodyweight percentage prescription, because if you're using the same bodyweight percentage as someone else who has a different power and strength level than you, then you two will be getting a completely different stimulus from the same bodyweight metric, so that isn't overly reliable. And if you are using that 69 to 96% bodyweight range, you need to keep in mind that the friction force between the sled and the ground needs to be accounted for. So even though on the sled you might not have 69% of body weight loaded, you might be within that threshold just simply accounting for friction there. And you don't need a complicated process or timing systems to figure out a sled loading that's proper for you. So if you're wanting to improve the 10 to 20 meter split of your run, for example, find a load that allows you to finish the 20 meter sprint at a constant speed, so you're not slowing down by the end of the sprint and you're also not accelerating when you finish it. You hold that constant speed. And then you keep track of this weight, and over time, as it becomes easier and easier, you can either up the weight or you can move on to improving the 20 to 30 meter segment of your sprint. And as for planning, you can alternate each one of your acceleration sessions as resisted or unresisted, or you can combine them into one session. So maybe the first half of your acceleration session is resisted sprints, and then the second half is completely unresisted. Or within that session, you can just alternate every single rep as resisted and unresisted to get a contrast effect there. For making it all the way to the end of this video, what I'll do is if you comment meta below, I will send the exact 3 workouts I use to improve the first 10 meters of my sprint, the first 20 meters, and the first 30 meters. And all 3 of those workouts include both sled sprints and body weight sprints.